the other element of this is how it impacts the offseason that we're getting there. And do you, this is, spoiler alert, we already recorded something on this that is now just terrible, gone in the ether. No one will ever hear it. Looking at what Memphis has done, do any trade or free agency targets now stand out to you for them? Because I still do have a few, but I'm curious as to see if that crossed your mind at all about how this impacts who they're going to target or what they're going to target in the offseason.
No, I mean, I going into this, I was in the camp where I just didn't want to see any moves like this. I think this was still a good one for Memphis, given what was brought back in the return. But so much depends on what happens with Eric Bledsoe here. I guess you're still looking for that shooter, that 3-and-D guy. I mean, but you're not close enough to true contention to make a play for Danny Green or something where it would just be, what are you boosting to? So I don't really have any specific targets for this team still.
I think they need wings and shooting more than ever, I would argue now, just because you've shrunk the floor with this trade, even though, Justice Winslow was a terrible shooter for them and barely played for that matter. And yes, as Daniel Green says in the chat, they have 3 firsts next year, or projected to have 3 firsts. And yeah, we already talked about the Bledsoe buyout. There's a chance that they don't even have to pay that $4 million, Daniel, depending on if he wants a buyout. Like, he's giving a crap ton of money back to where they're going to that's me. If I'm Memphis, I'm holding the line there. I would still like to see them, even though it doesn't look like they're going super win now. Buddy Hield still stands out here. And now you have the money to match it, where if Sacramento wants to lean into a rebuild, which they might, Buddy Hield, Eric Bledsoe structure, and then they're the ones that have to deal with the Eric Bledsoe buyout. And what are you giving them in addition to the basically 2 years worth of cap relief? You could also trade Steven Adams and then lean into Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5, which is something, I don't know if they've been reluctant to it, but they couldn't experiment with it last year because he hasn't been too healthy. And I also think he does need to get his fouling still under control. I think he might be better suited defensively at the 5, maybe, just because he won't have to cover as much ground in a lot of instances. And he seems to be there's a little bit of chaos there. So there are a lot of different moves they can make, but Buddy Hield stands out to me. If they wanted to, and what this also impacts is now they're definitely not going to be a cap space team, unless, I won't say definitely because we just saw trades happen. You're working with the non-taxpayers mid-level exception. Maybe there's something, I don't think he signs for this, but Will Barton is still a target that I would love for this team to help them generate more spacing with his passing and just his shooting in general. Is there a sign and trade with Denver? If Miami doesn't want to pay Duncan Robinson, that's also the other guy. If you're not looking at a Bledsoe trade, is there a sign and trade to be worked out for Duncan Robinson? Because I think he's spectacular. Other than that, can you look on the lower end of just some shooting? You just need to put floor spacers on the floor at this point. You don't even, in my mind, need to do full mid-level type targets. It's just, hey, can we get Wayne Ellington back in Memphis for a minute to generate some extra spacing? Not saying he has to play a ton of minutes. But maybe you could also get a veteran to come in and provide some spacing. You're funneling him the full mid-level exception, which I think at the non-taxpayers is going to be about between 9.5 and 9.6. No one stands out in total. I would like Doug McDermott for this team. Doesn't create a lot, but I think he'll probably get more than the mid-level, and I don't know why he would necessarily leave. They could take a look at a Terrence Davis, who's a restricted free agent, but those guys are also, well, not Doug McDermott, but Terrence Davis is on the smaller side, and you do want them to be more true wing-sized at this point. So I still think shooting is a priority, to where some of the targets we mentioned in the previous edition, Will Barton, Buddy Hield specifically, and you can go through, I'm assuming you're going to go through a lot of suggestions we have in the chat. I think those would be the 2 ideal names for me, with Duncan Robinson also looming. I just don't think the Heat are going to balk at any or flinch at any offer sheet or want to actually move on from him.
Yeah, so we've had quite a bit of activity in the comments here. Brad Henry says maybe the Grizz want to get to 8 for Wagner. That's Franz Wagner. I think that could make sense for this team. I wonder if they do have to move up to get him. It feels like he could feasibly be there at number 10 as well. Owen Myatt says, I'd imagine we lean more into Jaren at the 5 minutes, looked fairly good in the Utah series and fixes some of the spacing issues. I think that's the dream for Memphis, is that working, but it's just tough to rely on that given the fragility and the injury history on display here, where it's looked good, but the sample size has been so small that it's tough to commit to that without any contingency plans whatsoever. Dylan Hank says, I hear they like Josh Giddey at number 10. I've seen that one as well. I don't know how much validity there is to those rumors. I really like Josh Giddey as a prospect. I don't know if I love that fit. You're taking the ball out of Ja Morant's hands and you're adding another spacing liability. Like an oversized point guard who has no shooting to his game whatsoever at this stage. That feels like Memphis making a poor decision more than anything else right now.
Who would you be okay with them taking at number 10 now after making this trade, assuming they keep the pick? Is it actually Kispert?
I think that's the play right now. It would probably be a bit of a reach, but I can't come up with a better prospect team pairing at that slot right now. But I also do really like the idea of Moses Moody there if he doesn't keep rising up the boards. That's another great fit as a self-creator.
I've seen a lot of people wondering if, I don't think he will, just based off it feels like where he's been mocked, but is Jonathan Kuminga like the person that they're trying to trade up still to get?
If they're still trying to trade up, they better get into the top 6 probably.
He seemed like consensus top 5 or 6 at this point.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit surprised at his name.
I think they're probably helped by the Scotty Barnes helium we're seeing right now, where it doesn't feel like Kuminga's going to go in the top 5 unless there's a big surprise, but you still have to move up to get him.
Moral of the story, though, is they got to get shooting, whether it's signing someone like a Reggie Bullock or Alec Burks or making a little bit of a bigger swing on the trade market. I still like this trade for Memphis, though. I appreciate the bites at the apple they're giving themselves.